And we're back. I hope you've been practicing your pattern making skills. Pattern making is a complex skill, so it takes time to master. So practice and do your homework. Today we'll talk about our princess style lines and princess seams. There's a couple of different variations. Here are two variations. One, you can clearly see the seam is going from the waistline into the shoulder, and the second one is going into the armhole, right? Here's a clear indication where the seam goes right into the shoulder. This is an old vintage illustration, but it clearly shows you a princess style line, right? And this clearly shows that it goes into the armhole. And here's a more modern version of a princess style line into the armhole again. So let's get to work. By now you know the routine, right? You start with a piece of dotted paper. We're going to take our 2-dart sloper and trace your pattern all the way around. Your notches are clearly marked. Make sure your apex is marked as well. Next, we're going to redraw the legs of the darts, but this time we're going to draw them to the apex, right to the apex. Remember, originally the vanishing point is not touching the apex, but this time we're going to draw the legs to the apex. I'm going to put a notch right at the apex, right across the apex right here, because in a minute we're going to separate these two pieces, and the notch will help us connect the two pieces back together. We have removed the darts. We're going to do one minor adjustment around the apex on the side panel. You see, we have a very sharp corner at the apex on the side panel. So using your French curve or the hip curve, we're going to round this out and smooth this corner. So at this point, we're pretty much done with the drafting part of it, so that when you sew the seam together like this, this becomes our princess style line or princess seam from the waistline into the shoulder seam. Okay. For this second variation, we're going to put the style line into the armhole instead of the shoulder. And we're going to use the 1-dart sloper, and as always we're going to line up center front with one of these numbers on dotted paper and trace your pattern all the way around. Once again, we're going to redraw the legs of the dart to the apex like this. Next, we're going to draw the style line from the apex into the armhole. There's no specific point. Somewhere in the middle of the armhole is a good place to create the style line. So we'll put a little cross mark right here. And with your French curve, we're going to draw a line. It's a curved line from the apex into the armhole, like so. Next, we're going to cut the pattern out. Cut the dart out. We're going to remove the dart, just like we did in the previous exercise. Remove the dart. And also we're going to cut on the style line, the princess style line that goes from the apex into the armhole. And just like we did in the previous exercise, we're going to smooth and round out this corner, which at times could be a little too sharp, so it's a little more smooth. One final note, on this side panel, the grain line, we haven't talked about grain lines, but we will in the next class. the grain line in a side panel, the grain line is perpendicular to the waistline. So the grain line would look something like this. If you don't know what a grain line is, stay tuned because next class I will explain grain lines. Once you add seam allowance, this gets sewn together like this, and this becomes your princess style line into the armhole. Okay? So there you have it. I want you to look at pattern making from a creative standpoint. So be creative, have fun with it, okay? I'll see you next class.